So it's a continuation actually from what I started computers in mathematics. Sorry, my video cut and I didn't notice that it was not actually recording. But I can start from the basic flowchart symbols that we use when you're dealing with a flowchart. So there are symbols that I've already indicated there. So there's a symbol, the name, and also the function of the symbol. So you can use arrows in this case. So whether the arrow is going to your right, to your left, up or down, what does that indicate in a flowchart? Well, it indicates, the flow step or the flow between steps that you need to take. For example, if you need to move from A to B, it simply means that you can use an arrow to indicate that. Another, shape that you're going to use is actually an oval shape. So an oval shape may actually be drawn like this. At the end, it looks as if it's oval, or we can just use that. What does that indicate? Well, it indicates start or end of a process. So you're going to find, words that we are going to be using like, start or end. So at the start or end of a program, you can actually use an oval shape. So you're going to find that when you're starting a program or when the program is about to end, then it is possible that we use such a symbol, an oval, shape. What about in terms of a rectangle? What does that denote? Well, the rectangle denotes a process. So it actually denotes a process or an operation, a step that needs to be undertaken. Well, in a rectangle, this is where you apply what we are calling as being your formula. So you can put your formula, whatever formula that you have. For example, if I'm calculating speed, I know that speed is equal to distance divided by time. So such formula, such as when I'm calculating the speed, I can put it in that rectangle. So a rectangle, remember that this is where the formula is going to be put. It denotes a process or an operational step that you need to take. What about when it comes to a parallelogram? Well, for a parallelogram, a symbol that looks like this one is used to indicate an input or output that you have. So an input or output operation. And words that can be used include words like enter. So you can use words like enter. That's what you're going to be finding. They're going to be using words like display, or they're going to be using words like, print. It simply means that is what, you are able to put up in that one. So input or output operations. And words they are using, enter, display, or print. Then when it comes to what we are calling as being a diamond is also known as a decision box. Why? Because it signifies a point requiring either yes or no. So you need to make a decision when you reach this box. Now the decision that you make can either lead you to either a yes or a no, which will entail that you need to proceed in one of the direction based on the decision that you need to make. Well, the other thing that you need to remember are what we are simply calling as being basic, four operators that are used in a flowchart. So these are basic operators that are used in a flowchart. So the normal symbols we use in our mathematics, but when we are dealing with computers under flowchart, these are the symbols that we use. Under normal circumstances in our basic mathematical operation, we use addition, which we know to be the plus sign. That's the same one that we use also in the flowchart. We use subtraction or minus as we call it. It's the same, even under the flowchart we use the same. For multiplication, it is actually, different. Here we use, the cross symbol, but here we use what we are calling as being an asterisk or a star as you call it. Sometimes we also use division. Under basic mathematical operation, this is the division sign we use. But of course, under flowchart, we use what we are calling as being over. For example, if I've got A divided by B, here, under flowchart, under computers, we are going to write that as A, slash B, or A over B. That's our division that we are going to write. Another example that I can give you is that you are going to find is maybe you have, you have got a base raised to, to an index. For example, you have got A raised to the power n. This is the way we may normally write it, but under what we are calling as being a flowchart, we can write that as a, raised to the power n. So you can also write it in that, format. Well, let's try to look at maybe a quick example that I can actually get to give you so that you may just get a sense of what, we are talking about. I'll clear up the basic flowchart symbol, and I'll simply demonstrate using an example so that you are able to see, what we're able to do there, how to come up to construct what we are calling as being a flowchart. But in my subsequent videos, I'll give you more typical examples. Imagine that we want to calculate, in this case, we want to calculate the speed of an object, but we know that speed is equal to, distance, divided by what we are calling as being time. Imagine that we want to calculate the speed of an object, but of course they want us to do that. Well, the few operations that you may think of is that, first of all, I need to start what we are calling as being, the program. So I start the program. So therefore, remember, I'm using an oval shape. That's the correct symbol. So I'm going to write in there start, and we are going to use what we are calling as being, flow arrows to indicate, the steps. So what's the next thing that I'm going to do? Remember, in order for you to calculate speed, what two things do you need? Well, speed is equal to, as we know, speed is equal to distance divided by time. So we need to know the distance, and we also need to know the time. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to enter those. This is where we use the parallelogram. So in order for me to calculate my speed, I need to enter the distance and I need to know the time. So we need to enter that. So I'm going to put them there. So we use a parallelogram there. So what am I going to write? I'm going to say I'm going to enter. What am I going to enter? Well, it's the distance, comma, the time, because those are a prerequisite that I need in order for me to calculate, the speed there. So distance and time, that's what we are going to use. Well, when you enter that, what else do you need? Well, we need to now substitute this into the formula because we want to calculate we want to calculate the speed. So now, what am I going to use there? Well, this is where now you use what we are calling as being a rectangle. Remember what we said? In order for you, when you're putting a formula, the formula always goes in a rectangle. So this is where you're going to put up, in this case, your speed is equal to distance divided by time. Now, of course, if I wanted, I would have proceeded to displaying the answer and ended this program. But let me just try to, further, increase and see much of the symbols that we use. Suppose I say I have a decision that I need to make. And what is that decision? I simply ask, is the speed in this case less than 0? Well, if the answer is yes, if my speed is less than 0, it simply means that if it is yes, maybe I can say, on your screen, it should be able to display an error message should come. Well, it could be any error, but if the speed is not less than 0, then we can proceed in that direction. So if this answer is no to that question, it simply means we can continue in that direction. Now, of course, if that's correct, it simply means that I'm going to display my speed. So here, I'm going to say either display, or I can use the word print, in this case, S representing the speed. Then what will follow? Well, my program is going to come to an end, so I'm going to stop to an end. So what you see here is a typical example of what we are calling as being, a flow chart. So that is a typical example of a flow chart. So sometimes you may be given a flow chart like this one, and you can turn it into a pseudocode. But of course, I'm going to look at some more examples involving, construction of what we are calling as being a flowchart. Some errors may require you to go back. If it is maybe invalid, to go back and, substitute a new value, or it may require you, to end, directly to end the program. I'm going to look at that in my next videos. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video.